Alan Foyer joins us now live. Mr. Foyer, I know you don't particularly relish being on TV to talk about your reporting. It makes me all the more grateful for you being here with us tonight. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Let me ask you first about this reporting about the prosecutor who's been put in charge of this part of the January 6th investigation. What can you tell us about him and what exactly he's looking at that's different than all of the other prosecutors who have been at work on these cases?
Sure. So he was, his name is Tom Windham. He was brought in from Maryland. He's a career prosecutor, and although I don't know him personally, by all accounts, he's a kind of classic, federal prosecutor type. He's been described as diligent yet aggressive, sort of like forceful but cool under pressure. And his mandate is essentially to look at the question of whether or not there was criminal activity related to January 6th that took place outside of the grounds of the Capitol. As you said in your introduction, the Justice Department has been focused almost exclusively for more than a year on people who physically stormed the building. They went in, they broke windows, they fought with cops, or maybe they didn't. They just trespassed and entered restricted areas. But there's a whole other group of people who were involved in the political rally at the Ellipse, Donald Trump's Ellipse event, that preceded that. These are political organizers, speakers, people described as VIPs, members of Congress who were involved in that event, people within the Trump administration who were involved in that event. And the question is, did anything that they did help to kind of shape or inspire the violence and chaos that ultimately erupted? And that's what Thomas Windham has been brought in to look at, to answer that question.
Is this a seditious conspiracy question? Is this the kind of potential prosecution that we have seen around, for example, the Oath Keepers and those guys, or is this a different set of potential charges?
I don't know, frankly, but if I had to say, the seditious conspiracy charge that the Oath Keepers are facing, I think is specifically related to the issue of the weapons that they had stored across the river in Virginia, allegedly waiting to be brought into play when needed. If you look at things that, say, Representative Liz Cheney has said on the floor of the House about the behavior of former President Trump and others, the idea is that perhaps the charge here that may ultimately arise is a conspiracy to obstruct Congress and the work of Congress. And that has been the Justice Department's kind of go-to charge to describe the very unique political crime that was committed on January 6th, which is simply that by obstructing the peaceful transition of power, that was the crime that was committed. So, look, we don't know what charge, if any, may ultimately be brought. But everything kind of points towards the notion of, was there an effort to kind of obstruct the work of Congress right at the moment when lawmakers were doing the very crucial work of certifying the final results of the election?
Does Mr. Windham have a team? Does he have considerable resources for this work?
That's a good question. The short answer to that is there doesn't seem to be a big team yet. That said, we do know that, at least one subpoena has gone out, and he's kind of overseeing that. Ali Alexander, as you mentioned in your introduction, has been subpoenaed. And Windham is kind of, shepherding that subpoena. Whether or not there will be more people assigned to his particular team remains to be seen. Don't forget, there are 140 federal prosecutors sort of assigned to the investigation writ large. And so the job here is to see what is the nexus between the people who are on the ground and the people who were away from the Capitol ground. Like I kind of think of it as suits and boots in a way. And so a guy like Thomas Windom is presumably working closely with other federal prosecutors who are kind of steeped in the boots on the ground cases. So, we'll see kind of where that goes, as the days and weeks go on.
Let me just ask you about what I described as the sort of cynicism, the sort of healthy skepticism about the Attorney General saying that everybody involved at every level will face accountability here. What's your just bigger picture view as to whether or not the Justice Department is willing to make even politically fraught determinations, if that's where that's where the suits part of this suits and boots investigation, as you describe it, might lead?
Look, I mean, you quoted Attorney General Garland in your introduction. He has said he's going to follow the evidence where it goes. If you look at the case filings, right, it's very, very clear, and has been from before the emergence of this kind of, expanded vision of this case, that the Justice Department is very homed in on what effect former President Trump's words and actions had on people on the ground. It's apparent in charging documents. It's apparent in what are called statements of offense when people plead guilty. It's just very clear, if you pay attention to the paperwork, that the Justice Department is aware of the effect that Trump's words had on people on the ground. So, whether that results in a criminal case, that's just not something that we can tell at the moment. I would be surprised if the Justice Department knew at the moment. But in terms of whether or not they are paying attention to it, it's very clear they are. And now we know for certain that the Justice Department has kind of expanded its gaze, so to speak, and looked beyond people who were on the ground that day to those who were off-site but may have some sort of culpability.